The webinar today. This webinar is organized by the Secretariat of the Stockholm Convention in preparation for the Conference of Parties that is starting next week. As you know, that Dechlorane Plus, UV-328, and methoxychlor, those three chemicals will be considered at the next meeting. And in this webinar today, we will be focusing mainly on industrial chemicals that has several of specific exemptions proposed in the document that is proposed for consideration by the Conference of the Parties. So we are planning to have this webinar until 3:40 p.m. Geneva time. Have several of presenters, starting with the POP's Review Committee Chair from New Zealand, Mr. Peter Dawson, and POPROC members from Norway, and also participants, POPROC participants from Switzerland that have nominated listing of those chemicals, Dechlorane Plus, UV-328, followed by presentation from different stakeholders like NGO IPEN and the government, Japan, and industry, American Chemistry Council. We will have a short question and answer session, and we'll be sharing the presentation on PDF after the session, as well as recording will be available for accessing from our website. Now, if we could change my presentation to the first presentation here. There you go. So first, I will give a short overview of those three chemicals to be considered by the Conference of Parties. The meeting will start on the 1st of May, and the agenda item on listing of chemicals in Annex A, B, or C to the Stockholm Convention will be considered on 1st of May, Monday, afternoon session in plenary. Under this agenda item, there will be 4 parts for consideration. The 3 chemicals, methoxychlor, Dechlorane Plus, UV-328 for consideration, and then followed by the operation of POP's Review Committee. The plenary will most likely start with the chemical methoxychlor, a pesticide proposed by the European Union for listing. The text on proposed amendment is contained in document number 12 of copy 11. And as I just mentioned, this is a pesticide that went through the review by the POP's Review Committee, having risk profile and risk management evaluation documents adopted at its meetings. I would like to also highlight the chemical identity of this substance. This is mentioned in the risk profile for methoxychlor document in POPROC 16/9/add1, as methoxychlor refers to any possible isomer of dimethoxydiphenyltrichloroethane or any combination thereof, with a non-exhaustive list of CAS numbers. Currently, this text is not included in the proposed text for amendment, but parties could consider including such specificity of chemical identity in the listing. The second chemical for consideration would be Dechlorane Plus. This is a flame retardant, and you will be hearing more from other presentations. The document is in number 13, and the proposed action section contains the draft text for amendment that includes 2 groups of exemptions. One that is in accordance with Article 4, which is normally 5 years, plus a possibility for extending additional 5 years. That relates to aerospace, space and defense applications, medical imaging, and radiotherapy devices and installations. And in addition, there's a second set of exemptions that are for longer period, as it is used for replacement parts for and repair of articles in applications. Those are for until the end of the service life of the articles or 2044, whichever comes earlier. And you can see the list from A to I, with little further explanation provided in the text. The third chemical is UV-328. This is UV absorber, which is applied in several applications, including plastics. And here, similar to Dechlorane Plus, there are 2 sets of specific exemptions proposed in the document number 14. The first set, that is in accordance with Article 4 for 5 years, plus possibility for extension of another 5 years, have several of those applications highlighted in bold text in the first paragraph of this slide. And then another 4 applications that are for until end of service life of the articles, or 2044, whichever comes earlier. So as you can see, as these exemptions are quite complicated, that we thought it would be a good opportunity to hear more detail from experts and stakeholders. So now I would like to give the floor to Peter, the chair of the POPs Review Committee, if he had some additional remarks before we start presentations. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for that, Kay. Yeah, I think you have covered it all pretty well, so I won't take up too much time because we do have a lot of presentations to get through, and also we do want to have a decent amount of question and answer. So yes, the pop rock did actually spend quite a lot of time trying to get clear what the scope of the exemptions would be for both the Dechlorane Plus and UV-328. But there were still a few areas of uncertainty, and I think the proposals for both sets of exemptions as drafted now still can have some refinement, some clarification. So hopefully we will hear some more information tonight that will prepare us well for the discussions at the COP, and that will enable us to get the most refined and precise set of exemptions for those two chemicals. So, yep, without carrying on too much, I'll now, I think, pass over to Christina, is it, from Norway, to discuss the Dechlorane Plus. Hi, Christina.
Thank you, Peter. And hello, everyone. My name is Christina Tolvsen. I'm a POPROC member from Norway. I was the drafter of the intersessional working group that prepared the risk profile and the risk management evaluation on Dechlorane Plus that forms the basis for the POPROC recommendation for listing. And in this work, I was supported by colleagues in the Norwegian Environment Agency and the POPROC member from Suriname, Ms. Victorine Pinas, who was chair for the intersessional work and contact group on Dechlorane Plus. In this presentation, I will try to give a brief introduction to some of the information that forms the basis for the proposed listing. Will I be able to, next slide? Yeah, I will use, okay. There, thank you. Dechlorane Plus is a man-made chemical. It does not occur naturally. The technical Dechlorane Plus mixture contains two stereoisomers, syn and anti-DP, that are present in ratios of about 1 to 3, or 25% syn and 70% anti-Dechlorane Plus isomer. It has been sold under many different trade names, as indicated on this slide. As discussed in the risk profile prepared by POPROC, Dechlorane Plus is a global contaminant. It has been detected at many different locations worldwide, including in remote areas in the Arctic, Antarctic, and the Tibetan Plateau, and in various environmental media, including biota samples and humans. Emissions of Dechlorane Plus to the environment occur at all stages of the life cycle of Dechlorane Plus, and environmental monitoring data show that the highest levels are found in urban and urban industrial areas and at industrial sites, production plants, and near recycling and waste dismantling sites, which are also assumed to be important sources of emissions to the environment. Now turning to the process towards listing of Dechlorane Plus. In 2019, Norway nominated Dechlorane Plus to the convention due to concerns over its widespread occurrence in the global environment and its potential properties. At POPROC 15, that same year, the committee considered the nomination by Norway and decided that the Annex D criteria were fulfilled. POPROC 15 then established an intersessional working group to prepare a risk profile. The risk profile was then discussed at POPROC 16 and 17. And at its 17th meeting, the committee adopted the risk profile for Dechlorane Plus and decided that Dechlorane Plus was likely, as a result of its long-range environmental transport, to lead to significant adverse human health and environmental effects, such that global action was warranted. And then at its 18th meeting, the committee adopted the risk management evaluation for Dechlorane Plus and decided in accordance with paragraph 9 of Article 8 of the Convention to recommend to the Conference of the Parties that they consider listing Dechlorane Plus in Annex A to the Convention with specific exemptions as set out in paragraph 2 of that decision. As explained in the risk management evaluation, which is contained in the document POPROC 18/11 Add 1, Dechlorane Plus has been produced since the 1960s. It is a high volume chemical with an estimated global production of around 750 to 6,000 tons per year, or 1,980 on average. It's used worldwide. Originally, there were 2 known manufacturers globally, one in the US and one in China. Based on information we received to the POPROC process, we believe that the US facility ceased production in 2016 and that there is only one remaining producer globally. We also know that there have been regulatory processes initiated in some countries and regions to ban or restrict the use of Dechlorane Plus, and most notably China recently announced its intention to ban production, use, import and export of Dechlorane Plus from January 1st, 2026, which means that we anticipate that there will be no longer any global production after this date, as the remaining producer is in China. The risk management evaluation process identified a number of uses for Dechlorane Plus. Detailed information on those users are available in the risk management evaluation. Dechlorane Plus is used as a flame retardant additive in adhesive sealants and polymers. It is used as an extreme pressure additive in greases. It is also used in motor vehicles, which account for around 70 to 90% of the total global use volume. And cables and wires, again, is the main use in this sector. And overall, this means that the automotive sector is one of the main sectors using Dechlorane Plus. Other confirmed uses include aerospace and defense applications, electrical and electronic equipment, marine garden, forestry, agriculture, and construction machinery, and medical and radiotherapy applications. If you look at global volumes of Dechlorane Plus per application, polymers is the main use, accounting for as much as 93% of that, whereas adhesives and grease are minor uses, accounting for 5% and 8% respectively. As part of the risk management evaluation, the POPs review committee also considered information on alternatives. This assessment showed that alternatives were available for most users, and that markets and industries are transitioning away from Dechlorane Plus, but that fully tested alternatives to Dechlorane Plus may currently not be available for all applications, and also that a universal alternative is likely not available, meaning that there's no single drop-in chemical. Based on this information and other available information discussed in the risk management evaluation, including indicated needs for exemptions submitted by parties and other stakeholders, the POPs review committee, as already mentioned by Kai, adopted a recommendation to amend Part 1 of Annex A to the Convention to list Dechlorane Plus with specific exemptions for production and use in accordance with Article 4. The proposed listing considers the need for exemptions for sectors and articles that are due to long phasing times for alternatives and or long service lives of certain articles. And according to this, and upon entry into force of the amendment, there will be a 5-year time-limited exemption for production and use in aerospace, space and defense applications, medical imaging and radiotherapy devices and installations available for parties that register for those exemptions. In addition, POP's recommendation is to allow continued use of Dechlorane Plus for replacement parts and repair of articles in a number of applications, as listed here on the screen. Let's see. In terms of impacts of society of the proposed listing, the risk management evaluation suggests that a listing in Annex A with the proposed exemption will be efficient in reducing emissions and associated negative impacts on society. Estimates indicates an emission reduction potential of around 88 to 89% of the proposed listing. The listing is also assumed to have a positive impact on human health and environment due to reduced emission. And lastly, costs of listing Dechlorane Plus were considered to be bearable for most affected actors. So on my last slide, I have the documents that are up for consideration at the Conference of the Parties now in May. COP 11/13 is the recommendation for listing, which also provides further details on the exempted uses and applications. And then you have INF/24, which contains the comments received from parties. And then the relevant POPwork documents are available at the convention website and can be found via this link. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Christina, for the presentation on Dechlorane Plus. We now have a presenter from Switzerland, Andreas Dusa, also joined the webinar. Maybe if we could then listen to his presentation on UV-328. Andreas, will you be able to share your screen for your presentation?
Hello to everyone. Yes, I hope so. Just checking. I have to make sure which one it is.
Yes.
Now, full screen. Which one do you see? The right?
I see the I see the other one, not the present. presentation screen. Yes, I think that's good now.
Okay, great. Good morning, good evening, good day to everyone. It's a pleasure to introduce you to the next chemical that the POPROC has recommended for listing in Annex A. 3 years ago, we have submitted a proposal to list UV-328 in Annex A to the Convention. The chemical made its way through the POPROC process, in which the committee concluded that UV-328 fulfills all POP criteria. In September of last year, the POPROC finally decided to recommend to the Conference of the Parties that UV-328 be listed in Annex A with specific exemptions. UV-328 is a phenolic benzotriazole with long systematic names. Therefore, the acronym is used. A key feature of UV-328 is that an intramolecular hydrogen bond is formed. This affects its ability to absorb UV light and to protect various surfaces from it. I obviously don't have the time to go through all POP criteria in detail now. So I chose one particular result that I found striking. It's the fact that UV-328 was found in concentrations of several micrograms per gram in the preen gland oil of seabirds from really remote islands. You can see the location of those islands on the two globes. To put these concentrations into perspective, the maximum concentrations of individual POPs and biota of remote regions, as reported in their respective risk profiles, were compared. It is obvious that UV-328 is at the upper end of the range found in POPs. National and regional control actions have been identified in the EU and a few other countries. Most notably, UV-328 was identified as a substance of very high concern in 2014 and was included to the authorization list in 2020 in the EU. Companies in the EU reviewed their need for a continued use of UV-328 after the sunset date, that is in November 2023. As the EU did not receive any applications for authorizations by May last year, that was the deadline, it may be concluded that all companies have found suitable alternatives. In contrast, the UK received one application for authorization for a highly specific use. UV-328 has been produced for half a century and in quantities exceeding 1,000 tons per year globally. 3 years ago, there have been 77 suppliers globally. However, this number might have changed since then. Most countries do not produce UV-328 domestically, but import it. UV-328 has been used in a wide range of applications and products. These include various types of plastics, printing inks, rubber, in outdoor furniture, construction materials, leather, and textiles. A major application sector is in the automotive industry, where it is used in paints, coatings, sealants, adhesives, and various fluids. The use concentrations are typically in the range of 0.1 to 3%. In some cases, they might reach up to 10%. There are challenges for the industry associated with the possible control measures. In particular, the substitution process may be time-consuming for some sectors. Further concerns relate to the supply of replacement parts for motor vehicles and industrial machines. According to the European Automotive Manufacturers Association, the substitution of UV-328 in replacement parts will not be feasible, in particular for vehicles which are no longer in mass production or where the manufacturing of replacement parts has ceased and replacement parts have been put on stock. For this reason, the POPROC concluded that a specific exemption is needed for replacement part of motor vehicles and industrial machines. I will provide more details in a minute. Several alternatives to UV-328 are available. These include other phenolic benzotriazoles, but also other UV absorbers from other chemical classes. Alternatives appear to be technically feasible and accessible in sufficient quantities for the most relevant applications. As mentioned earlier, the placing of UV-328 on the market will discontinue in the EU after the sunset date in November of this year. It can be assumed that suitable alternatives are available on the market for most uses, since no applications for authorization have been received. It needs to be emphasized that there is a risk of regrettable substitution. Alternative light stabilizers, including other phenolic benzotriazoles, might be harmful to human health and/or the environment. Therefore, alternatives must be carefully selected to avoid regrettable substitution. Based on the information received, the POPROC recommends to the Conference of the Parties to consider a few specific exemptions. There are 5 proposed specific exemptions in accordance with Article 4, which means with a standard duration of 5 years that may be extended by the Conference of the Parties for another 5 years. In addition, there are 4 specific exemptions for replacement parts where a longer duration is required. I will provide further details in the next few slides. The first one is on motor vehicles of various types. UV-328 is, among other uses, contained in radiator grills and bumper systems. More information on uses in motor vehicles will be provided in the presentation by the representative of the Japanese government. The POPROC has received a statement from industry that they are in the process of phasing out UV-328 in new vehicles. However, this will take a few more years. The next specific exemption recommended by POPROC concerns a highly specific use. The elastomer top of mechanical separators in blood collection tubes manufactured by one company contains UV-328. The company has identified an alternative substance to replace UV-328. However, due to the testing requirements for medical equipment, a specific exemption until 2027 is needed by this company. The volume of UV-328 used is rather small and emissions are expected to be negligible for this type of use. POPROC also received the information that a specific exemption for industrial coating applications, such as vehicles and large steel structures, is needed to allow more time for the substitution process. It has been argued that coatings with alternatives to UV-328 need to undergo long-term weathering tests to demonstrate their durability. Polarizers containing a triacetylcellulose film, TAC, are used in displays, camera lenses, and so forth. UV-328 there protects the liquid crystal molecules in these applications. More technical information on the applications of TAC film will be provided in the presentation by the Japanese government representative. The POPROC further received information that a specific exemption for photographic paper is needed to allow for more time for the substitution process. Photographic paper has high color retention and light fastness requirements, making the choice of the right UV absorber critical. The recommended specific exemptions for replacement parts are fully covered in the presentation by Shinichi Irimagawa from the Japanese government. By that, I would like to thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Andrea. So we have now heard the presentation by Norwegian POPROC member on Dechlorane Plus, and also for Switzerland, who has nominated listing of UV-328 specific presentations. And we would now move on to presentation by stakeholders who could cover both chemicals. Let me see if my colleague can give presentation role to Sarah from IPEN. Yes, I can. I see that. Dan, would you be able to give the presentation role to Sarah?
I think I'm the presenter now.
Yeah, you are.
Thank you very much. And thank you for providing the opportunity to present some data from IPEN. And IPEN is the International Pollutants Elimination Network. And my name is Sarah Brochet. I'm one of the observers who follows the POPROC work. For those of you who don't know IPEN, we are a global network of public interest civil society organizations in 125 countries, working together for toxics-free future. And I just wanted to mention that IPEN was actually founded when the Stockholm Convention was negotiated. So this is really suitable for our work. It was a way to help organize civil society organizations who wanted to contribute to the development of the convention, but also in the work of the convention. And we've been actively doing so since then. The IPEN as a network is driven by local priorities. So it's a way of gathering issues that are important locally in many countries and bringing them to the global policy arena, like the Stockholm Convention. But then also after decisions, making sure that work is ongoing in countries to implement the decisions that have been made by the convention. And one of the things that we think is really important is to provide data from countries on the POPs that are under discussion under the Stockholm Convention to show impacts, to show presence of the POPs that are under valuation, since they are nominated to the convention and when they are established as POPs, they are the world's worst chemicals, so to speak. But before I get into the data, I just want to acknowledge all the hard work that is behind the data. I'm the one presenting here, but what I'm going to show you is really the hard work of IPENers in more than 50 countries. So a shout out to anyone who's on this webinar, but also to all the colleagues out there. I want to start with some data on UV-328. And we have presented this before, so I'm going to go through it quite quickly. It's also been presented to the POCROC as supporting information. We looked at recycled plastic pellets from high-density polyethylene and looked at chemicals in these recycled pellets. They come from small-scale recycling in 23 countries. We looked at a range of UV stabilizers in addition to other chemicals. So not only UV-328, but since that's the topic today, the highlight here is that 71% of those samples contain UV-328 in varying concentrations. If you look at the 6 benzotriazole UV stabilizers that we included in our analysis, all the samples, all 24 samples, contained between 2 to 6 of these type of substances. So it is a widely used group of substances. We also looked at beach pellets. So these small nurdles, lentil-sized pieces of plastics you can see at almost any beach nowadays that are used to make plastic products, but they end up on beaches when they are spilled. It could be during production. It's very typical during transport and then during storage. You can find chemicals in them from 2 sources, so to speak. Either they are in the plastic as an additive, or they can also be chemicals that are attached to the pellets, so absorbed to the pellets from the surrounding environment. And you can't tell which is the case just by the chemical analysis, but it is both are relevant. And we looked at pellets from 22 different countries and found UV-328 in 101 of these 110 samples, so 92%, again in varying concentrations. We also tested for UV-328 in children's products from 3 countries. We looked at toys and hair accessories and found UV-328 in most of these items as well. So it is really, UV-328 is really found in all samples that we have tested for UV-328, which I think is quite telling. I also wanted to mention one other report that we released together with colleagues from Sri Lanka last year about the Express Pearl disaster, where this storage cargo ship Express Pearl caught fire outside Sri Lanka, and a lot of both toxic chemicals, but also a huge amount of plastic pellets were released. While not all of these pellets were released into the environment, the ship itself carried 1,680 tons of plastic pellets. That's the estimation. No one really knows for sure. That would be around 84 billion pellets if you count them one by one. So that's quite a lot of pellets. And if you've seen photos from the beaches, they were just scooping them up with shovels because the beaches were all covered. It is counted as one of the largest spills on record today. And this is, of course, an unusual spill, but it is very common with spills during transport and storage, as mentioned. So in comparison, this is unusual, but looking at the chemicals in these plastic pellets on the ship, of course, it's quite a disaster. In this case, there were actually only a few samples collected from beaches that did contain UV-328, but we did find UV-326, so one other chemical from the same family, were detected in all the samples that we took. So it seems to indicate that this is one of the transition chemicals that are being used. And if you look at the scientific literature about UV-326, there is indication of health and environmental impacts. So I'll come back to that a little bit later as well. I also wanted to share some new data. This is a sneak peek from a report that we will release later this week. And it is a study from small-scale recycling in Thailand. So recycling done in communities, usually done close to homes or within homes. And a range of different chemicals were analyzed in this study, but I will focus specifically on Dechlorane Plus, and since that is the chemical coming up for the COPs. Here is some photos of what that looks like in this community. So as you can see, these are the sheds where you collect all the waste, but this is also located very close to homes. Quite wide range of different types of samples were collected to look at the full chain of the handling. So it's primarily e-waste and vehicle waste that comes to this facility. The first step is the dismantling of the e-waste and the ELV waste. So the first step is just disassemble everything, sort it, and grind the plastics. So leftovers are then transported to dump sites that include cables, for example. So what happens is that they get burnt to get to the metals in the cables. And then the ash is brought back to the community to be dealt with there. A range of different samples to document different types of pollution was collected. So we took blood serum samples from e-waste workers, but also blood serum samples from a control community of organic farmers at a location about 15 kilometers away. So well out of the sort of dust that is created by this. So there are no known sources of Dechlorane Plus in that community. We looked at dust, soil and sediment, and also various type of food stuff. And the results was that in most of the different environmental compartments, there were quite significant pollution from Dechlorane Plus. So I hope you can see it on your screen. I know it's quite small, but if you look at the orange-red numbers, that's the concentrations found close or at the community. And the blue numbers are samples taken as control samples far away from this place. I want to highlight the amounts found in eggs from free-range chicken. It's just quite significant numbers. And of course, the blood levels of the e-waste workers that were sampled. So all in all, this shows that it was quite wide contamination from different sources. The foodstuff, like crabs and rice, had quite low or non-detectable concentrations. So that's good. But other environmental compartments, so eggs, but also dust, sediment, soil, had higher levels. And as you can see, that results in wide exposure to these workers. And if you look at the literature data that's been published, a lot of studies have been done in China, for example. There is some from Africa that looks at these type of recycling communities and look at Dechlorane Plus levels. This is in the same range as some other studied site in Tanzania in Africa. That is also sites that are of similar size. But if you look at data from China, where the recycling sites are usually much bigger, you also find much higher levels. And I also just want to say this, as mentioned before, these are not naturally occurring substances. So the levels should not be, there should not be any levels of Dechlorane Plus in the blood of workers. So comparing one bad site to an even worse one might give the wrong impression. But so just to say that as well. I'm gonna wrap up here, and not to take too much time, but I do want to highlight some key messages from our views on these substances based on the data that we have. And that is, as mentioned, we see that a range of benzotriazole UV stabilizers are ubiquitous in plastics, and that includes recycled plastics. And as mentioned before and in the earlier presentation, there are replacements that are known to be of concern, but there is also a big data gap on the health impacts of many of these substances. So there is a high potential for regrettable substitution, where UV-328 could be replaced with something equally toxic. We know that Dechlorane Plus has been used as a marketed and regrettable substitute to Deca-BDE that was listed a couple of years ago under the Stockholm Convention. And what we see is that the use of this is leading to exposure to local communities, e-recyclers. We do see from the risk management evaluations that POPROC did that there are a range of alternatives available for both these substances. And noting the wide range of exemptions that are being recommended, even though the number might not seem that many, they're quite wide. We think that those alternatives should be looked more closely at, and there should be more justification why the exemptions are needed, since the RMEs note that there are alternatives already available. Given the impact that this has on the ground, it's easy to start looking at these evaluations and sitting in the meeting rooms, and it becomes quite theoretical for all of us, but it's good to keep in mind that continued use of these substances will continue the exposure to people. And that is something that the convention is aiming to prevent. We are going to have 3 side events during the Conference of the Parties that touches on chemicals in plastics. I quickly wanted to show that as well, and we'll of course advertise that more at the Conference of the Parties. But with that, I would like to say thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this presentation. Yes, I think so far we've heard a few times about regrettable substitution as Dechlorane Plus being brominated flame retardant that we had seen in the past. Other brominated flame retardants already listed under the Stockholm Convention, and Dechlorane Plus has been the substitution for those persistent organic pollutants. And UV-328 also, we heard that there are a similar group of chemicals that could be replaced if it is listed under the convention, and such regrettable substitution must be avoided at all cost. And also thank you for sharing additional information. So having heard already the presentation from that concerns POPROC process that has established the persistent organic pollutant nature of those chemicals, and some information about the current use and concern over regrettable substitution, as well as the use of chemicals in plastics, that is also relevant to the consideration, ongoing consideration on new plastic treaty. Now we would like to move on to the presentation by the government of Japan, who had contributed very valuable information also during the POPs Review Committee meeting, how this chemical is being used in a country and industry, and that's the specific wording of what is currently contained in the proposed text for amendment, some of them coming from the government of Japan. We also heard from the government of China during the meeting. And yeah, we would appreciate if you could further share this information with a wider audience. Now we have like 127 participants joined in this webinar. So Mr. Irimagawa?
Yes.
Do you have, yeah, you now have the role for as a presenter, so you could move the slide by clicking on the arrow icon at the top. It's just above the slide, and there's tiny arrow where you could click, then the presentation will move to the next page.
Okay, ちょっと待ってね。違う。キャンセル。どっち？共有ですよね。共有でアプリケーション？
The slide is already on the screen, so you can just click on the...
really? I couldn't see. Anyway. Yeah, let's start.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Hello, everyone. This is Tokyo, Japan. Almost close to the 10 o'clock p.m. I'm Shinichi Irimagawa. First of all, at the beginning of, I would like to say thank you very much for giving this opportunity. And this explanatory material and visual aid is based on the using at the POPROC 18 brominated, pre-meeting and side event. At that time, Ms. Honzawa was taking care of this, but I was changing a little bit because of focus into the proposal exemptions. So on this time, especially described the need for proposal exemption for Dechlorane Plus and UV-328 and the appropriateness of the exemption period. Please, one click. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Oh, I got it. Thank you. Exemption for Dechlorane Plus. Christina already mentioned Dechlorane Plus is used in spare parts for the wide range of electrical and electronic equipment used in social infrastructure, as well as in motor vehicle and industrial machines. In this presentation, I'd like to emphasize about the importance of the spare parts for repair and replacement of the how to say EEE, electrical and electronic equipment. These products are called EEE, I just mentioned, used for social infrastructure in this presentation. Each of these components has its own required specifications, and failure to meet their performance can result in serious consequences. You can imagine the fire.
Not sure if your microphone just got muted.
No.
Okay, we can hear you. Please
Okay.
continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Japanese industry considers legacy parts for automotive and industrial machine contained UV-328 to be very important. I have heard that some medical device also contains UV-328 and needs spare parts. Next, please. Next, please. Yes. This is an example of the end product using Dechlorane Plus and UV-328. These machines played an important role in food production and disaster countermeasure in social functions. As you see this, I'm sorry. Industrial machine is broad in scope, so I have provided specialized on which industrial machine refer to. Industrial machine for using in agriculture and construction, and EEE category, medical and in vitro diagnostics device, and analysis, measurement, control, monitoring, test, production, and inspections. Just mention under. For the safety of the production, the manufacturer cannot change the part without permission. If they cannot be repaired, they will be discarded in their entirety, and equipment and machinery, especially those involved in medical care, are extremely high impact. Next, please. Yes, thank you. These are medical devices. Next, please. Yes, this is in vitro, in vitro diagnostics and devices and analysis. Next, please. This is analysis materials. Next, please. It's manufacturing instruments. Next, please. On this slide, I'd like to explain the typical case like automotive. And as a part of the required frame lieutenant performance, it's a wire harness and electrical installations. Next, please. Just a figure of a wire harness or power cable, etc., etc. Of course, these are standard value for those parts are determined. Maybe sometimes you can see that your computer's power cable, UL mark or something. This is a, how to say, required levels of them. Next, please. This is the image of the wire harness inside of a car. Next, please. It's technical issues of alternative consideration in wire harness. This is a part of development and clarification of alternative consideration process. One of them. The left hand or the upper side, orange one, it's just an image of inside of the wire harness coating. Several ingredients in there. Development to try to balance to meet expecting properties, but meeting those multiple properties is very difficult for alternatives. Next, please. Yes. Example of the technical changing alternatives. At the current research stage, changing to another frame lieutenant will reduce the frame lieutenant effect so far. Next, please. Yeah, thank you. Now, let's take a look at the spare parts for EEE, EEE. Why are EEE spare parts important? There is two main reasons. First, they are often safety critical. Here is what happens if there are no spare parts and their repair is not longer possible. This could be a life-threatening situation. It takes time to approve a product and the manufacturer cannot just replace it with a different part on its own. Next, please. Second, EEE product lifetime is long. They are designed to be repaired and used for the long period of time. Next, please. Yes. If the exemption of the spare parts is not allowed, the instrument cannot be repaired and does not work. Those situations makes our instrument waste and makes their lifetime short, results in unavailability of those instruments for citizens. So I propose the specific exemption for using the spare parts for those red line, the red characters. Next, please. Yes. These are EEE for social infrastructure, such as medical device and in vitro diagnostics devices. Next, please. Yes. UV-328 is used in liquid crystal display. This figure shows the structure of the liquid crystal display panel. The TAC film in the polarizer contains UV-328. When changing this polarizer or changing the current of the backlight, it is necessary to turn each product. If one of those parts cannot be repaired, their entire device will be discarded, which is very harmful to the environment. Next, please. Yes. These are also EEE, such as measuring or testing instruments. Next, please. I hope you understanding that this is necessary for social infrastructure. And part of those UV-328 is using are not limited to the outside of the car, like inside the panel displayed or something. Next, please. At the document of POPROC 18, spare parts using in the automobile at 20 years exemption from containing Dechlorane Plus and UV-328. Modern cars are designed with a product life of about 20 to 30 years. Modern car vehicles suppliers are obligated to supply replacement parts for the long period of time so that consumer can safely ride in their car and vehicles until the end of the product of life. What the reason mentioned about this, what the reason mentioned above that required a grace period. Car maker need to continue to supply products contaminated Dechlorane Plus or and UV-328 so that consumer can use the product safety. Oh, this is the end of my explanation. I'm happy if this is a helpful information. Thank you. Take your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think you have a few more slides with pictures. Is it possible to screen a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah.
These are reference. Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. These are reference of the case of UV-328 contains the big group parts. Andrew Sands mentioned about this is almost, I'm sorry, exterior of the car. It's using paints or how to say bumpers. Then and several parts of the almost the plastic area. Next, please. This side is automotive spare parts for the Dechlorane Plus, powertrain and underhood. Powertrain is a battery side or air conditioning side, such electrical and regarding the parts of them. Next, please. This is also the powertrain under the hood. Like you can familiar about these several parts, I think. Next, please. This is also the powertrain. Battery unit or control unit or something like that. so many electrical equipment contains the Dechlorane process because it needs to their flame retardant properties strongly. Yes. Next, please. This is also these are heat unit or motor side. So even the gasoline gas system car illuminated the world, still the motor side, the electrical car remains the world. It is still need this part too because the motor. Yes. Next, please. This is the other area. So this is gasoline pumping system regarding these are lamp. Also, lamp will also this is necessary because sometimes the light have a high temperature, right? This is then they need anti-discompose plastics. Then they have to include the Dechlorane Plus and sometimes UV-328 too. Okay. Maybe this is the end of sheet, I think. Yeah.
Right. Yes, thank you very much for showing, sharing with us all these images of the spare parts or the very specific use that is required for UV-328 and Dechlorane Plus. It's very appreciative that Japan has already conducted its analysis that which areas these chemicals are being used. And for Dechlorane Plus application, some of those terms that we saw in your slides reminds me of the listing for decabromodiphenyl ether. I think we also heard that Dechlorane Plus being replacement, regrettable substitution for deca-BDE, that we have already very similar specific exemptions listed in Annex A to the Convention for deca-BDE, for example, powertrain and underhood applications, fuel system applications, and so on. So yeah, we also have suspension and interior application, just like seat belts that we're seeing in the slide in front of us. So for deca-BDE in automotive spare parts, that's already listed under Annex A to the Convention. We understand that Dechlorane Plus also has very similar use in that sense. Okay, and I saw some questions already raised in the chat box, which was responded by one of the presenters today, Andreas. Now we would like to hear our last presenter from industry. I understood, I think this will be first presented by John. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Secretary Woodall and Chair Dawson for organizing this webinar. Hello, my name is John Norman, or I go by Norm more commonly. I'm a toxicologist at the American Chemistry Council, or ACC. While ACC's member companies do not make these specific chemistries, we want to ensure that the process is defined in the Stockholm Convention is used to identify those chemicals that warrant listing. So just a quick review for the criteria of listing under Stockholm that you all are very familiar with. For Annex D, these are screening criteria that a chemical must meet and be shown to be persistent, bioaccumulative, causing adverse effects, and have the potential for long-range environmental transport. And then once it meets these criteria, it can move on to the Annex E phase or risk management phase, and required for listing under Annex E, there's the additional requirement that the chemical is likely, as a result of its long-range environmental transport, to lead to significant adverse human health and/or environmental effects. This means that the chemical must not only be transported and detected in remote regions, it must also accumulate in the surface media to an extent sufficient to cause significant harm. So just briefly, I'll touch on UV-328 and Dechlorane Plus. UV-328, as noted, is a plastic, in plastic pollution is a novel mechanism for long-range environmental transport that was used for this substance. Some members did express some concern that accepting this theory could open the door for classifying any plasticizer or substance that adsorbs to plastic as a POP. The data is uncertain as to whether or not the long-range environmental transport is occurring at concentrations high enough to cause toxicity. That is saying that the mere presence or exposure to a chemical does not mean there is a risk of harm. And that's a very important toxicological principle to keep in mind. As noted, studies did find UV-328 in birds in remote regions across the globe. And it was concluded that because UV-328 was not found in prey, but plastic was present, that this was evidence of long-range environmental transport. However, the Annex E criteria for listing was not met, as significant adverse effects to human health or the environment were not demonstrated. There were significant uncertainties remaining regarding the potential adverse effects. And in order to move UV-328 to the top, there was a compromise that was reached and referencing the precautionary principle as in the draft risk profile. In order to provide a little more clarity and a little bit more historical context on long-range environmental transport, an intersessional working group was convened to work on this document. The group has done an amazing job and has put in a lot of work to finalize this historical document that looks at the past decisions of long-range environmental transport and helps to summarize these past decisions. Briefly on Dechlorane Plus, it was quickly demonstrated that it was persistent, had the potential to bioaccumulate, and had the potential for long-range environmental transport. However, there were questions around toxicity and the significance of adverse harm that was looked at in more detail through an intersessional working group. Questions were raised as to whether or not the risk profile showed significant evidence of adverse effects. The UK was conducting a long-term fish toxicity study on Dechlorane Plus to better characterize potential toxicity. It was noted at one of the Pop Rock meetings that Dechlorane Plus couldn't be considered by the COP until 2025 if the committee waited for the UK study to be completed, but if it was moved through the process, it could be considered by the COP in 2023 if that draft risk profile was approved. The committee adopted a precautionary approach to move the chemical to the upcoming COP. The committee adopted the chair's proposal to adopt this draft risk profile, including the reference to the precautionary approach, with the note that the risk profile would be revised as additional data becomes available in reference to the UK study, among any other information that was developed in the interim. And a question remains that should the Pop Rock's recommendation be based only on the available scientific information at the time of when it's making its determination? And should the COP be allowed to make the determination if the precautionary principle is warranted? The precautionary principle is a policy decision rather than a scientific judgment. And so I think that's a question that's still outstanding to be considered. Just briefly, some aerospace and defense related proposed exemptions. We've already heard quite a bit on UV-328 and Dechlorane Plus, but for UV-328, it's primarily liquid crystal displays and instruments for analysis, measurements, control, monitoring, testing, production, and inspection. And there are a number of uses that have specific exemptions being requested in the aerospace, space, and defense system. The ICC-AIA Annex F submissions specifically have Dechlorane Plus uses in aerospace and defense, and these include aero engine manufacture and repair, missile rocket motors, electrical items, structural panels, in naval systems, and in aircraft cabin interiors. I would now like to turn the presentation over to my colleague Mark Herwig from RTX to discuss specific exemptions for Dechlorane Plus for the aerospace industry.
Yes, thank you, Norm. My name is Mark Herwig. I am a representative of the aerospace and defense sector, and specifically, if you would kindly move to the next slide. Is it possible? There we go. Specifically that of the Pratt & Whitney company. Similar to what Mr. Irimagawa had presented for the automotive sector, just a couple of brief slides here to represent a condition for the aerospace sector that one case study that Norm had represented on the prior slide. So Dechlorane Plus can be found in what is called the fan case rub strip, and it is part of an aircraft engine, many aircraft engines, and the purpose here is to essentially provide efficiency and optimize vibration control and overall reliability of the engine. This is a total system design concept and product. It is very complex and highly engineered, as you can see from the picture. The aerospace sector has, and specifically the Pratt & Whitney business has, for a number of years now, been working toward replacement of the material system for the fan case rub strip. And so far we have had great success actually in identifying a non-Dechlorane Plus containing material system for these rub strips. But the message here is that finding an alternative and qualifying it are two very different things. And it is a long, time-consuming process because, as you might expect, the objective here is principally here is for flight safety of aircraft and the reliability of the engine, which can last in service for decades. So to get there, there are a lot of steps that have to be fulfilled and completed for substitution, including ensuring no regrettable substitution, but further to make sure that the engine system overall with the fan case rub strip can actually get other governmental approvals like the Federal Aviation Administration in the US, and a wide variety of customer approvals for the new system design. Next slide, please. So this is another example in support of the request for the exemption, and it is based principally on simply the need for time to continue the substitution process, and including getting the other governmental approvals and customer approvals for both new aircraft and service of existing aircraft engines in operation today. So it's time limited, but will allow transition from the old material systems to new material systems without being disruptive to global aviation and aerospace activity. As gleaned from the auto sector, there are a lot of places and a lot of market existence of Dechlorane Plus. Having the exemption, the time-limited exemption, will allow for the consumption of what already exists in the market out and getting the new certified replacement technology in place in a seamless transition that will avoid major societal disruption from an aerospace and defense perspective. We want to make sure that flight safety is the prominent feature in all of this, and we also want to make sure that society continues to operate and not have grounded fleets of aircraft and disruption to economies and so on and so forth that this sector provides. So those are my two brief slides. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Great, thank you. Would this be the end of your presentation, Norm?
Yes, Kai. Thank you so much for allowing us to present.
No, well, thank you very much indeed for sharing this very valuable information. As you all know, that the POPs review committee process really needs the information submitted by parties, from NGOs and from industry, and scientists with information about the chemical properties and POPs characteristics. And so really the process has been over years of review. And now that we have wide range of information with the different sectors. Today we heard a lot about automotive and also from aerospace and space industry. But I think it was hopefully that this would shed a bit more light to participants. But I also saw some comment from Mr. Asada from Toyota Motor Corporation, who might want to take the floor to say a few words. If so, you could perhaps open the microphone and take the floor. Otherwise, the floor is also open for questions and answers.
Okay,
you could raise your hand in that.
Ono-san, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you for chance to make my comment. As Ilmaga-san said, our industry is very concerned for the POPs related issue, and all presenters mentioned auto industry. Because once automotive industry adapted some chemicals, because our business scale will be always a good customer for chemical industry and keeping 2 years. Actually speaking, auto industry is very interested in the POPs related issue, like not only the Dechlorane Plus, but UV-328. We are also trying to abandon these chemicals to use. But as you know, auto industries, we change the model maybe 5 or 6 years. So switchover needs significant time. And also the Ilmaga-san mentioned, we have the responsibility for the legacies to keep the model of life almost 20 years. And not only the supplies, especially some case, we need certifications. The certification is applied for vehicle itself and sometimes the parts by parts. And flame retardant is one of the key issues for the certification. And if we change, we are not allowed to use a legacy spare parts. We have a difficulty to decertify the parts, not only the parts, some cases in the vehicle itself for the old vehicles. So the legacy spare parts requirement is very important for the such industry, not only the auto industry, but the medical device and such certified related industries. So we understand that to abandon these chemicals as much as possible, but also we request to understand each industry's situation, and maybe JAMA will input such input through the METI. And we also understand why we emphasize the legacy spares so strongly. That's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. I would also like to remind ourselves that those chemicals that are proposed for listing and went through the POPs review committee process has been characterized as persistent organic pollutants. That means that those chemicals as a result of long-range environmental transport, that it could lead to significant adverse human health or environmental effects, such that global action is warranted, and that the Stockholm Convention's objective is to protect human health from adverse effects of persistent organic pollutants. And therefore, as much as information from industry for the need to continue using this chemical for certain applications, especially for spare parts, is expressed, it is also important to keep in mind how we could reduce the risks from those chemicals from environment and human health. And that we've also heard that some of those chemicals are actually regrettable substitutions, and that we hope really that the industry would work very hard not to replace those chemicals with yet another regrettable substitutions. And for that purpose, it is very important that all of us, including industry, NGO, and academia, are aware of the Annex D screening criteria, where it provides that new chemical or a chemical to be newly introduced in market should not have such POP-like characteristics. The presentations we have heard contained a lot of visuals and graphics and pictures, which would really be helpful for us to understand. So thank you very much for those presentations. I wonder if any of the presenters or participants would like to take the floor for questions or further comments. Floor is open. Okay, I think I see Peter's hand up.
Yes, thank you, Kay. So yeah, firstly, I'd like to thank all the presenters for their efforts and time they've put into making those presentations. I think we have heard a lot of new good information, especially around the need for the exemptions, and I guess like I mentioned at the start, at the Pop Rock we did try quite hard to get the wording for the exemptions quite right. So I guess I would like at this point to ask the last two presenters that we heard from Japan and the American Chemical Council whether they think that the wording for the exemptions that are proposed for the listings that are in the COP documents, so that's papers 13 and 14, are suitable, are sufficiently clear enough to get the level of exemption that is needed for those specific uses. And just on that, I've got one question. I think it is for Andreas, because I'm not sure we've got the wording quite right for the UV-328 listing when it comes to the triester cellulose film in polarizers and in photographic paper. If you look in the paper COP 11/14, both those applications are written on the same line, which sort of reads as if the triester cellulose applies to the photographic paper also. But I think on Andreas's presentation we saw that photographic paper was actually a separate item altogether to the TAC film and polarizers. So perhaps Andreas can just clarify that for us. And just following on from that, I think in Mr. Urumigawa's presentation, we saw quite clearly where the TAC film and polarizers is needed. But have we got actually similar strong evidence as to why there needs to be an exemption for photographic paper? So that's really a question, I think, for Andreas. Thanks.
Right. Go ahead, please. Andreas, take the floor.
Thank you for this question, Peter. To my understanding, TAC does not refer to photographic paper. This is separate. It's only in the polarizers. The request for this specific exemption, if I recall correctly, came from the Chinese delegation. Maybe they can provide a few more details on that.
Okay, thanks for that, Andreas. So it looks like we might have to slightly rearrange the wording that's in the proposed draft decision in the paper 14 then. Okay.
Well, yes, I mean, the actual negotiation could take place during the conference the parties meeting. Of course, the plenary could decide to establish a contact group if needed for further detailed discussion. Yeah, the proposed text of amendment is being prepared based on the discussion at the POPs review committee and the recommendation text. But of course, all these details could be tweaked during the meeting based on the most updated information we would receive from participants. Yeah, and I also saw Mark's comment back related to language for Dechlorane Plus is appropriate from aero engine perspective. Right. Okay. Are there any other questions from the floor you'd like to mention? All right. I think yeah, we've done excellent job in terms of timekeeping. Really, this is very impressive with this amount of details we have heard. Right. Asada-san from Toyota also added information that UV-328 is used for avoiding yellowing of polarized plate. Right. Okay, so I guess that if we do not have any further questions or comments, I can close this webinar, and my colleague will make available the presentations in PDF file and also a link to the recordings if your colleagues would like to listen in. Dan, did you wanted to say anything?
No, this is fine. I will send the follow-up email this afternoon with the link to the recording as you just indicated, and that's all for me.
All right. So
Okay, I might just add again my thanks, Kay and the Secretariat for organising this webinar. I was quite surprised that we got so many attendees, I think up to 128. That's quite impressive. We heard before that it was 10 o'clock in Japan. Well, it's of course now 1:30 AM in New Zealand, and very soon I'll have to go and pack my suitcase to head off on the 2-day trip to Geneva. So I'll be there on sometime, I think maybe Friday or Saturday morning, I think. And I hope to see many of you there, and we can continue these discussions. So thank you very much for everyone attending, and thanks for the presenters. And once again, thanks, Kate.
thank you then. Bye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, all the presenters.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye
ありがとうございました。Bye.